If I may, I'd like to clarify one detail.
What is it now? Mr. Holland, was it? Or whatever your name is.
The name is Helmer, not Holland.
Fine, Mr. Helmer. We're trying to close a $500 million deal. I don't have time to hold your hand through it.
I'd appreciate it if you'd hear me out.
Rocco looked away as though the conversation was already over, while Anthony remained standing.
Then allow me to save everyone some time. I'm canceling our $500 million deal.
By the time Rocco Beckman finally looked at the farmer, the $500 million deal had already slipped through his fingers. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. Anthony Helmer walked into the Granger Foods boardroom at 9 sharp, his suit pressed, his folder tucked under his arm like a shield. 40 floors up, the city of Atlanta spread out behind tall glass windows. The room smelled like fresh coffee and new carpet. Today was supposed to be the best day of his life. 18 months of work had led to this moment. 18 months of phone calls, site visits, and late nights going over numbers with his daughter, Naomi. Today, Helmer Cooperative Farms would sign a $500 million deal with one of the biggest food companies in the country. 200 farming families back home were counting on this. Anthony could already picture telling them the news. Beside him walked Tobias Lindorf, his young associate, nervous energy buzzing off him like static. "You ready?" Tobias whispered. "Been ready for 18 months," Anthony said, and meant it. The boardroom doors opened. Rocco Beckman stood at the head of a long table, flanked by a row of board members in matching navy suits. Beckman was tall, silver-haired, the kind of man who filled a room before he even spoke. He smiled wide and stuck out his hand, but not to Anthony. "Tobias! Good to finally put a face to the name," Beckman said, pumping the young man's hand. "Heard great things." Anthony held out his own hand a beat too long before lowering it. Beckman glanced at him, gave a short nod, and turned back to his seat. No handshake, no welcome. Like Anthony was just furniture that had walked itself in. Maybe he's just distracted, Anthony told himself, taking his seat. Big day for him, too. The meeting started. Beckman launched into numbers, projections, delivery schedules. But every word came at Tobias. Every question, every joke, every glance. Tobias. Anthony sat 2 feet away. The actual founder. The man whose name was on the cooperative. The man who had built this deal from nothing. And Beckman looked through him like he was made of glass. A young assistant came around with coffee. She served the board members. She served Tobias. She skipped Anthony entirely, moving on to the next person like he wasn't there. Anthony raised his hand slightly. "Could I get a cup as well?" "Oh, sure, sorry," she mumbled, hurrying back. Small thing. Anthony let it go. He'd been in rooms like this before. He knew how to keep his face calm even when something ugly was crawling up the back of his neck. Tobias shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. Twice he tried to redirect the conversation. Actually, Anthony is the one who handles the cooperative's distribution strategy. He'd know more about— Right, Beckman said, already moving on, eyes back on Tobias. "So, as I was saying, your delivery windows." The Granger board members chuckled along, some scribbling notes, none of them looking at Anthony either. It was like watching a play where everyone had agreed on the script, except him. By the time they reached the contract terms, something hot and tight had settled in Anthony's chest. He cleared his throat. "I want to clarify the delivery volume clause on page 12, Anthony said, voice steady, firm. "It states a minimum of 40,000 units monthly, but our agreement back in March was for 35. I need that corrected before—" "Yeah, that's standard boilerplate," Beckman cut in, not even looking at the page. He turned to Tobias. We can walk through the logistics piece after lunch, get your numbers guy to double-check the freight costs. I'm sorry, Anthony said, sharper now. I was speaking. Beckman blinked at him, like a man noticing a fly buzzing too close to his ear. Sorry, what was that, Mr. Holland? Helmer, Anthony said. Right, Helmer. Beckman said it like the name itself was an inconvenience. He gave a short laugh and turned back to his papers. Anyway, Tobias, let's talk freight costs. The room moved on without him. Pens scratched, papers shuffled. Somebody laughed at something Beckman said under his breath. Anthony sat there, hands flat on the table, 18 months of work sitting 2 feet away on a page nobody was reading to him. He looked at the empty coffee cup the assistant still hadn't refilled. He looked at Tobias, who wouldn't meet his eyes anymore. And something inside Anthony, something old and tired and done, finally snapped quiet into place. Anthony set his pen down on the table, slow, deliberate. The small click of metal against polished wood cut through Beckman's voice like a gunshot. One more thing, Anthony said. Beckman didn't look up right away. He was flipping through a page with Tobias, pointing at a number. Hold that thought. We're almost… I said one more thing. Anthony's voice came out harder this time, and the room went still. Even the board members stopped scribbling. Beckman finally turned to him, eyebrows raised like Anthony had interrupted something sacred. Go ahead, Mr. Holland. Helmer. Anthony said it slow, clear, like he was teaching a child to read. My name is Anthony Helmer. I founded this cooperative. I built it from 40 acres my father left me into 200 families who put food on tables in 6 states. I flew here on my own dime to sign this contract, and for the last hour, you have looked at me exactly twice. The room was dead silent now. Tobias's face had gone pale. Beckman let out a short laugh, the kind men like him used when they wanted to shrink a problem down to nothing. Nobody's ignoring you, Anthony. We're just moving fast. Big company, lots to cover. You mispronounced my name twice. You let your assistant serve coffee to everyone in this room except me. You cut me off mid-sentence to talk freight costs with a man who's worked for me 8 months. Anthony kept his voice level, but every word landed like a brick. I don't need you fast. I need you to see me sitting in this chair. Beckman's jaw tightened. The easy smile slipped for just a second, replaced by something colder. I think you're reading a lot into a busy meeting, Anthony. We're trying to close $500 million here. I don't have time to hold your hand through it. A couple of board members shifted in their seats. Nobody spoke up for him. Nobody spoke up at all. Anthony looked around the table, at the navy suits, the silent faces, the careful way everyone avoided his eyes like he was something embarrassing to be near. 18 months, 200 families, and in this room, he was invisible. He stood up. The chair scraped back loud against the floor. Anthony reached down, picked up his copy of the contract, unsigned, the pages still crisp from this morning, and laid it flat in the center of the table. Anthony, come on, Tobias said quietly, half rising. Let's just… Sit down, Tobias. Anthony didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This isn't on you. He buttoned his jacket, looked Beckman dead in the eye. I don't do business with men who can't see me. Then he turned and walked toward the door. Anthony? Beckman's voice chased after him, edged with disbelief, like nobody had ever walked away from him before. Anthony, you're really going to throw away $500 million over a few coffee cups? Anthony didn't stop, didn't turn around. He pushed through the glass doors and into the hallway, the sound of his own footsteps the only thing he could hear over the blood pounding in his ears. Behind him, faint through the closing door, he heard Beckman laugh, an easy, careless laugh, already turning back to the room. Cold feet, Beckman said to his board. loud enough Anthony was sure he meant for him to hear it. "He'll be back by Friday. They always come back." Anthony's hands were shaking by the time he reached the elevator. Not from fear. From something deeper. Something that had been building for years. Every meeting where he'd been talked over. Every deal where his word had been worth less than a white man's handshake. Every room where he'd had to prove twice as hard that he belonged in the chair he was sitting in. The elevator doors slid shut. His reflection stared back at him in the brushed steel. 50 years old, jaw tight, eyes burning. He pulled out his phone before he even reached the lobby and dialed Bella Alliston's number. She picked up on the second ring. "Anthony, how'd the signing go?" His voice cracked, just slightly, before he caught it. "Bella, I need you to clear your evening. Something happened." He stepped out onto the street, the Atlanta heat hitting him like a wall, and looked back up at the glass tower behind him. 40 floors of a company that had just made the worst mistake of its life. Bella Alliston's office sat on the second floor of a converted brick building downtown, the kind of place with creaky floors and a window unit that rattled too loud. Anthony had known her 20 years, since she was a young lawyer fresh out of school, and he was a young farmer trying to keep his father's land from going under. She'd helped him build the cooperative from the ground up. She was the only person he trusted with something this big. She was waiting for him when he walked in. 2 mugs of coffee already poured. Her reading glasses pushed up into her gray-streaked curls. "Sit down," she said. "Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out." So he did. The handshake that never came. The mispronounced name. The coffee cup nobody filled. The way Beckman talked through him like he was a wall somebody had accidentally built in the middle of the boardroom. By the time Anthony got to the part where he stood up and walked out, his voice had gone tight and rough. Bella didn't interrupt once. She just listened, her jaw setting harder with every detail, scribbling notes on a legal pad. When he finished, she sat back and let out a long breath. "I believe you. Every word. I'm not crazy, right?" Anthony said. "I'm not blowing this out of proportion." "Anthony." Bella looked at him steady. "You've sat across from men who didn't respect you before. I've watched you smile through it for years, because the deal mattered more than your pride. The fact that this finally broke you tells me it was bad." She turned to her laptop, fingers moving fast over the keys. "I've heard whispers about Granger before. Nothing solid. Let me pull something up." Anthony waited, sipping his coffee, watching her face change as she scrolled. "Anthony!" Her voice had dropped lower. "Look at this." She spun the laptop toward him. On the screen were 3 names, 3 small, minority-owned supplier companies that had worked with Granger Foods over the past 2 years. All 3 had quietly ended their contracts. All 3 cited the same vague reason: communication issues. "Communication issues," Anthony repeated, the words bitter in his mouth. "That's what they called it when they stopped paying a Latino-owned dairy supplier in Ohio on time, 3 months running, until the man had no choice but to walk. And this one," Bella pointed to the second name, "a Korean-American produce distributor in California. Same story. Couldn't get anyone at Granger to return a call for 6 weeks straight before they cut ties." Anthony stared at the screen, his stomach turning slow and sick. "This isn't one bad meeting, Bella." "No." She closed the laptop halfway, looking at him hard. "This is a pattern, and you might be the only one with the profile and the leverage to actually do something about it." The word leverage sat strange in the room. Anthony shook his head slowly. "I didn't walk out today looking for a fight, Bella. I walked out because I'm tired. Tired of proving I deserve a seat at the table every single time I sit down at one." "I know." Bella's voice softened, just slightly. "But you might not get a choice anymore. Companies like Granger don't change because somebody asks nicely. They change when the cost of staying the same gets too high. Anthony rubbed his hands over his face, exhaustion settling deep into his bones. 50 years old, and somehow this still felt like the same fight his father had fought, and his father before him. "I'm not interested in revenge," he said quietly. "I just want to be seen, treated like a man who built something real." "I hear you." Bella reached across the desk and squeezed his hand once, firm. But sometimes being seen means making noise loud enough that they can't look away anymore. She pulled the laptop back toward her, already typing again. "Let me dig deeper tonight. Pull contracts, dates, any paper trail I can find on these 3 suppliers. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with before we decide what to do next." Anthony nodded slowly, watching the city lights flicker on outside her rattling window. "Call me first thing in the morning," he said, standing, gathering his jacket. "Whatever you find." "First thing," Bella promised. "I mean it, Anthony. Get some sleep tonight. Tomorrow, this gets a lot bigger." Anthony's phone rang at 6:47 the next morning, before the sun had fully cleared the tree line behind his farmhouse. He was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of black coffee going cold in front of him, staring out at the fields without really seeing them. He grabbed the phone on the second ring. "Bella?" "I found something," she said. No hello, no small talk. Her voice had that sharp, focused edge it got when she'd been up all night chasing a thread. "You need to sit down for this." "I'm sitting." Granger Foods filed their quarterly investor projections 2 months ago. Public record, easy to find if you know where to look. They told their shareholders, in writing, that the Helmer cooperative deal was as good as done. $500 million, locked in, supplying their entire Eastern distribution network starting next quarter. Anthony felt his stomach tighten. "But I never signed." "Exactly. And their next quarterly shareholder report comes out in 9 days. Bella, let that sit a second. Anthony, if that contract isn't signed by then, Granger has to explain to every investor and analyst watching why a $500 million deal they bragged about just evaporated. That's not a bad headline. That's a stock price problem." Anthony sat with that for a moment, turning it over. He'd walked out of that boardroom thinking only about his own dignity, about not wanting to spend 1 more minute being talked over by a man who couldn't be bothered to learn his name. He hadn't thought about numbers. He hadn't thought about leverage. Before he could respond, he heard footsteps on the stairs, and his daughter Naomi appeared in the kitchen doorway in sweatpants, hair pulled back, phone already in her hand. "Dad? Who's on the phone?" Then, seeing his face, she crossed the kitchen fast. "What happened?" "Bella found something," Anthony said, putting the call on speaker. Naomi was 28, sharp as a tack, a financial analyst who'd left a comfortable job in Charlotte 2 years back to help her father modernize the cooperative's books. She listened to Bella repeat the shareholder report timeline, and Anthony watched something light up behind his daughter's eyes. The same look she got when she found an error buried 6 rows deep in a spreadsheet that explained everything. "This is huge," Naomi said, already pulling out a chair, opening her laptop on the table. "Dad, this isn't just about what they did to you in that room. This is real financial exposure for them. Give me an hour. I can pull their public filings and build out exactly how bad this gap looks to investors." Anthony managed a tired smile. "You sound like your mother. She used to get that same look going through the farm's books." "Mama would have already had it built," Naomi shot back, fingers flying across the keyboard. For the first time since walking out of that boardroom, something loosened in Anthony's chest. Maybe this didn't have to be a war. Maybe it could be simple. Granger needed him more than he'd realized, and now he had something to walk back into the room with. An apology. A renegotiated contract, fairer this time, with Beckman forced to finally look him in the eye. Maybe justice didn't always have to be loud. "Bella," Anthony said, "what if we use this to get a real conversation, not a fight? Just Make them treat me like I matter, and we sign somewhere closer to what we agreed in March. That's smart, Bella said carefully. But Anthony, listen to me. Companies like this don't usually come back swinging fair. Let's see what they do before we decide how soft to play this. Naomi was already 3 tabs deep into Grainger's investor relations page, scribbling numbers onto a legal pad balanced on her knee, murmuring percentages under her breath. Anthony stood, walked to the window, looked out over the fields just starting to catch morning light. For the first time in 18 hours, he let himself breathe a little easier. Maybe this would work out clean. His phone buzzed again in his hand. A new call. A number he didn't recognize, area code from Grainger's headquarters. He glanced at Naomi, then at the phone screen, his stomach tightening back up all over again. "Bella, hold on," he said. "I'm getting another call." He answered it slow, cautious. "Mr. Helmer," a smooth, practiced voice said on the other end. "My name is Andrew Werlin. I'm chairman of the board at Grainger Foods. I think it's time we talked." Anthony put the call on speaker and set the phone down on the kitchen table, where Bella was still listening on the other line, and Naomi sat frozen, pen hovering over her legal pad. "Mr. Werlin," Anthony said carefully, "I wasn't expecting to hear from you." "I imagine not." Andrew Werlin's voice was smooth, unhurried, the voice of a man who'd spent 30 years in boardrooms learning how to sound calm while delivering bad news. "I heard about yesterday's meeting. I want you to know the board takes this seriously." Anthony waited. He'd been in enough negotiations to know when someone was circling before they landed. "Rocco can be direct," Werlin continued. "Sometimes that directness comes across the wrong way. I'd like to find a path forward that works for everyone." "A path forward," Anthony repeated slowly. "Does that path involve him apologizing? Looking me in the eye and saying my name right?" A pause on the line. "I think what would serve everyone best, Mr. Helmer, is a clean resolution. I'm prepared to offer you $2 million, paid directly to you, personally, separate from the cooperative, in exchange for a standard non-disclosure agreement. You'd walk away with your dignity intact, financially secure, and this whole unfortunate incident stays private. No headlines, no mess for anyone." The kitchen went dead silent. Anthony stared at the phone like it had grown teeth. Naomi's mouth fell open. Even Bella, usually unshakable, didn't speak for a long moment. "You're offering me money to disappear," Anthony said finally, his voice low and flat. "I'm offering you a generous settlement to move forward, Mr. Helmer. Discreetly. Before things get complicated for everyone." Werlin's tone never changed, never cracked, like he was discussing a routine business matter instead of trying to buy a man's silence. Naomi grabbed the legal pad and scrawled 3 words on it fast, shoving it toward her father. "This is a bribe." "Mr. Werlin," Bella cut in sharply, her lawyer voice taking over. "This is Bella Alliston, Mr. Helmer's attorney. I want to be clear that any settlement offer involving an NDA needs to go through proper channels, in writing, reviewed by counsel." "Of course, Ms. Alliston. I expected nothing less." Werlin didn't sound rattled at all. "I'll have paperwork sent over this afternoon, but I'd encourage Mr. Helmer to consider it quickly. These things tend to go smoother the sooner they're resolved." Anthony felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't an apology. This was a man trying to make a problem go away before it cost Grainger Foods anything real. "What about the other suppliers?" Anthony asked suddenly. Silence on the line. A beat too long. "I'm not sure I follow," Werlin said, but something in his voice had shifted, gone careful. "The dairy supplier in Ohio, the produce distributor in California, the communication issues that ended both their contracts." Anthony let the words sit there, heavy. "Were they offered $2 million too, Mr. Werlin? Or just me?" Because I'm the one threatening to make noise before your shareholder report comes out. The silence stretched long enough that Anthony knew he'd hit something true. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, Werlin said finally, his voice cooler now. I'll have the paperwork sent this afternoon, Mr. Helmer. I hope you'll consider it carefully. The line went dead. Anthony set the phone down slow, his hand not quite steady. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and Naomi's ragged breathing beside him. He didn't even deny it, Naomi said finally, fury cracking through her voice. Dad! He basically confirmed it. They've done this before. Anthony. Bella's voice came through clear and firm. Do not sign anything. Not today, not this week. You hear me? Anthony stood slowly, walked to the window again, hands braced on the counter. $2 million. Enough to ease every worry the cooperative had ever carried. Enough to disappear quiet and comfortable. Let this whole ugly thing fade into something he never had to think about again. But it would also mean the dairy farmer in Ohio stayed buried. The produce distributor in California stayed silent. Whatever pattern Bella had found would stay exactly that. A pattern nobody ever had to answer for. He turned back to face his daughter and his phone, where Bella was still waiting on the line. This was never about the money, Anthony said quietly, the decision settling into his bones like something solid finally locking into place. We're not signing anything. We're exposing this. All of it. 3 days passed quiet. Almost too quiet. The kind of silence that made Anthony's skin crawl. No more calls from Werlin. No paperwork showed up that afternoon like he'd promised. Anthony told himself it was a good sign. Maybe the man had thought better of trying to buy his silence. He should have known better. The call came in on Thursday morning while Anthony was out checking irrigation lines in the South Field. His cooperative manager, a steady, no-nonsense woman named Rosie, who'd worked the books for 12 years, sounded shaken when he picked up. Anthony, we got a problem. Coastal Fresh just canceled their standing order, effective immediately. Anthony stopped walking. Coastal Fresh was one of their 3 biggest regional distributors, the kind of relationship that took years to build. Canceled? How? We've had that contract for 6 years. They said it's a restructuring decision, corporate level. No real explanation beyond that. Rosie's voice tightened. Anthony, I don't like the timing of this. Neither did he. By the time he got back to the farmhouse, Naomi had already heard, and she'd been digging. She met him on the porch, laptop open, face pale. Dad, it's not just Coastal Fresh. She turned the screen toward him. Bramwell Distribution called an hour ago, too. Same story. Restructuring. And I just got off the phone with Ridgeline. They're pausing our contract pending review. 3 distributors, 3 cancellations, all within 24 hours of each other. This isn't a coincidence, Anthony said, the words coming out low and hard. Bella arrived 20 minutes later, having driven straight from her office the second Naomi called her. She sat at the kitchen table, jaw tight, listening to the full list. This is retaliation, she said flatly. Grainger doesn't have direct control over your distributors, but they do business with all 3 of these companies, too. One quiet word from Grainger about reconsidering future partnerships, and these distributors cave to protect their bigger relationship. It's not illegal on paper. It's just cruel. Cruel and effective, Naomi muttered, already pulling up spreadsheets. Dad, I need to run the real numbers. How long can we survive without these 3? Anthony nodded, feeling the weight of 200 families settle onto his shoulders all at once. Harvest season was coming. Trucks needed somewhere to deliver to. Workers needed to be paid. This wasn't an abstract fight anymore. This was real food, real paychecks, real families who had nothing to do with what happened in that boardroom. Naomi worked through the afternoon and into the evening, fueled by black coffee and fury, building out projection after projection. Anthony paced. Bella made calls, trying to feel out whether this was something she could prove in court, gathering whatever paper trail existed. Around 9 that night, Naomi finally pushed back from the table, rubbing her eyes. 6 weeks, she said. We've got 6 weeks of runway before this gets serious. After that, we start missing payroll. The number hit Anthony like a fist to the chest. 6 weeks. He thought about his father, who'd built this cooperative up from 40 acres and a stubborn refusal to quit. He thought about families who trusted him with their land, their livelihoods, their children's futures. They think they can starve me out. Anthony said quietly, "Make me crawl back and sign that NDA before the shareholder report drops." "Probably," Bella said. "Which means they're scared, Anthony. Scared enough to play dirty this fast. That tells you something." Anthony sat down heavy across from his daughter, exhaustion pulling at every part of him. "I'm not signing it. I don't care how bad it gets." "I know." Naomi reached over and squeezed his hand. "But we need to move faster than they are. Sitting here waiting isn't going to save the cooperative." She was quiet for a moment, thinking, then looked up sharp. "I know a journalist, Jennifer Vashner. She covered an agricultural piece I worked on 2 years back. Fair, thorough, doesn't back down from a fight. If Granger thinks they can bury this quietly, maybe it's time somebody made noise loud enough they can't." Anthony looked at his daughter, 28 years old and fighting harder for his name than he sometimes had the strength to fight for himself. Something in his chest steadied, just slightly. "Call her," he said. "Tomorrow. First thing." Naomi was already reaching for her phone. Jennifer Vashner was already seated when Naomi walked into the coffee shop the next afternoon. A small table near the back window, 2 coffees ordered, a notebook and digital recorder laid out neat in front of her. She was late 30s, sharp-eyed, dressed simple, jeans, a blazer, the look of someone who didn't waste time on appearances when there was real work to do. "Naomi Helmer." Jennifer stood and shook her hand firm. "It's been a while. Your dad's cooperative still doing well?" "That's actually why I'm here." Naomi sat, pulling a folder out of her bag. "We've got a story." "A big one." Jennifer's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't reach for her recorder yet. "I'm listening." Naomi laid it out in order. The boardroom meeting where Beckman ignored her father for 90 straight minutes. The mispronounced name. The coffee cup nobody filled. Anthony standing up, placing the unsigned contract on the table. Walking out on $500 million rather than sit in a room where he didn't exist. Then the NDA bribe from Werlin. Then, just yesterday, 3 distributors canceling within 24 hours of each other. Jennifer listened without interrupting, but her pen started moving about halfway through, fast, careful notes filling the page. "That's a hell of a story," she said when Naomi finished. "But I need more than your word for it, Naomi. You understand that, right? I go after a $500 million company. I need this airtight." "I know." Naomi slid the folder across the table. "There's more. 3 other minority-owned suppliers worked with Granger over the past 2 years. All 3 ended their contracts. All 3 got the same vague excuse. Communication issues. A dairy supplier in Ohio. A produce distributor in California. We found a third, too. A packaging company out of Texas." Jennifer flipped through the folder, scanning names, dates. The pattern Bella had spent 2 sleepless nights confirming. Her jaw tightened as she read. "This isn't one bad meeting," Jennifer murmured, almost to herself. "That's what my dad's lawyer said, too." Naomi leaned forward. "Jennifer, this is bigger than what happened to my father. If this pattern's real, Granger's been doing this for years and getting away with it because nobody had the platform or the guts to call them on it." Jennifer closed the folder slowly, tapping it against the table, thinking. I'll need to verify everything independently. Reach out to all 3 suppliers myself. Get them on record if they're willing. That takes time, Naomi. I'm not running a story I can't defend in court. How much time? 4 days. Maybe 5 if someone doesn't want to talk. Jennifer's eyes were steady, serious. But I want to be straight with you. Once I publish this, there's no taking it back. Your father needs to be ready for what comes next. Cameras? Attention. People online who'll say ugly things no matter how clear the facts are. Naomi thought about her father, 50 years old, exhausted, sitting at the kitchen table the night before staring at unpaid invoices like they were a verdict already handed down. He's ready, Naomi said. He's tired of staying quiet to make other people comfortable. That evening, back at the farmhouse, Naomi relayed the conversation to her father and Bella. Anthony sat with his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold, listening carefully. 4 or 5 days, he repeated. That's 2 weeks out from the shareholder report. Cutting it close. It's the right move, Anthony, Bella said. A story built on solid ground holds up. A rushed story falls apart the second Granger's lawyers start picking it apart. We need Jennifer to do this right. Anthony nodded slowly, but something in his chest stayed tight and uneasy. He thought about Beckman's easy laugh as he walked out of that boardroom. He'll be back by Friday. They always come back. He thought about Werlin's smooth, careful voice offering him $2 million to disappear. These were men used to winning quiet, used to problems folding before they ever became real fights. Let her take her time, Anthony said finally. But Bella, keep digging on our end too. I want every piece of paper, every record, ready the second Jennifer's story drops. We only get one shot at this landing right. Bella nodded, already pulling out her legal pad. Outside, the sun was sinking low over the fields, painting everything gold and orange, the kind of evening that, on any other week, would have felt peaceful. Tonight, it just felt like the calm before something much bigger. The story published at 6:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, while Anthony was still out checking the irrigation lines before sunrise. He didn't even know it had gone live until his phone started buzzing in his pocket so hard he thought something was wrong. He pulled it out. 40 missed calls. Over 200 text messages. His hands went a little unsteady as he opened the link Naomi had texted him at 6:02 a.m., just 2 words above it. It's live. The headline filled his screen. Silenced at the table. How Granger Foods built a 500 meters empire by erasing the suppliers who built it with them. Anthony stood frozen in the middle of his own field, sun barely cresting the tree line, reading every word. Jennifer hadn't held back. She laid out the boardroom meeting in plain, devastating detail. The mispronounced name, the coffee cup, the 90 minutes of silence. She had on-record quotes from the dairy supplier in Ohio and the produce distributor in California, both describing nearly identical treatment. She included Naomi's financial analysis, laying bare exactly how big a hole this left in Granger's promised shareholder numbers. By the time Anthony made it back to the farmhouse, the story was already trending nationally. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Strangers were sharing it everywhere, people he'd never met, writing things like "This is why I stopped buying their brand." And finally, somebody said it out loud. Naomi met him at the door, laptop already open on the kitchen table, eyes wide and electric. "Dad, Granger's stock dropped 4% in the first hour of trading. 4%, Dad. That's real money." Bella arrived 20 minutes later, phone pressed to her ear, already fielding calls from 2 different news outlets wanting comment. "This is moving faster than I expected," she said, hand over the receiver. "Granger's PR team is scrambling. I just heard they're drafting some kind of statement." The statement came out by noon. Anthony read it standing in his kitchen, jaw tight. Granger Foods takes these concerns seriously. We regret any unintentional oversight during our recent meeting with Mr. Helmer and remain committed to fostering inclusive, respectful partnerships with all our suppliers. Unintentional oversight, Anthony repeated, the words bitter in his mouth. 90 minutes of looking through me wasn't an accident, Bella. That was a choice. I know, Bella said, but it's something. It's the first time they've had to publicly admit anything happened at all. The calls kept coming all afternoon. A national morning show wanting Anthony for an interview, a major grocery chain reaching out, asking if Helmer Cooperative Farms might be interested in a supply conversation, strangers from 3 different states leaving voicemails just to say they were proud of him for standing up. Anthony sat at his kitchen table, overwhelmed, watching his phone light up over and over, feeling something loosen in his chest that had been tight for almost 2 weeks straight. Around 4 o'clock, his phone rang with a number he recognized now, Granger's headquarters. He let it ring twice before answering, Bella leaning in close to listen. Mr. Helmer. Andrew Werlin's voice had lost some of its smooth confidence from before. I wanted to reach out personally. I'm listening, Anthony said, careful. This story has put the board in a difficult position. I want you to know I take the contents of it very seriously. There are conversations happening internally about leadership. Anthony caught Bella's eye across the table. Leadership. He understood exactly what that meant. Is that your way of telling me Beckman might lose his job? Anthony asked plainly. A pause. I'm saying the board is reviewing everything that happened, Mr. Helmer, including how it was handled, and how it's being handled now. Werlin's voice tightened slightly. I'd ask that you not say anything further to the press until we've had a chance to address this internally. Anthony almost laughed. 3 days ago, this same man had offered him $2 million to disappear quietly. Now, he was asking for patience. I'm not making any promises, Mr. Werlin, Anthony said. You had your chance to do right by me in private. You chose silence and a bribe instead. Whatever happens now is the result of that choice, not mine. He hung up before Werlin could respond. That evening, the farmhouse felt different than it had in days. Lighter, somehow, despite the exhaustion sitting heavy in Anthony's bones. Naomi made dinner while Bella stayed late. The 3 of them gathered around the kitchen table going over what came next. Anthony looked at his daughter, flushed with adrenaline, scrolling through hundreds of supportive comments on her phone. He looked at Bella, steady as always, already planning their next move. It feels like maybe, Anthony said slowly, almost afraid to say it out loud. This is actually going to work out. 2 days after the story broke, Anthony sat under hot studio lights at a local news station, a microphone clipped to his collar, his hands folded steady on his lap despite the nerves churning underneath. The anchor across from him, a kind-faced woman named Carla, leaned forward with the practiced warmth of someone who'd done 1,000 of these interviews. Mr. Helmer, walk us through that moment. What made you finally stand up and walk out? Anthony thought about it for a second before answering, the way he always did. No rush, no performance. I spent 90 minutes in that room, he said, and not once did the man across from me look me in the eye. I built that cooperative from 40 acres my father left me. 200 families depend on it. And in that room, none of that mattered. I wasn't a partner. I was furniture. He paused. I didn't walk out because I was angry. I walked out because I refused to keep proving I deserved to be seen. The interview ran 4 minutes. By the time Anthony left the studio, it had already been clipped and shared online thousands of times, his calm, steady delivery resonating in a way that felt, for once, entirely in his control. The momentum kept building through the day. 2 national retailers reached out directly to Naomi, asking about supply conversations, bigger names than even the distributors they'd lost. A produce buyer for a regional grocery chain called personally, telling Anthony that watching the interview had made her proud to do business with Helmer Cooperative Farms. It felt, for the first time in 2 weeks, like the ground beneath Anthony's feet had finally stopped shifting. That evening, the farmhouse kitchen filled with the smell of Naomi's cooking, her grandmother's gumbo recipe, something she only made on good days. Bella stayed for dinner. The three of them gathered around the table, plates full, the tension that had lived in that room for 2 weeks finally easing into something close to celebration. "To Dad," Naomi said, raising her glass of sweet tea, "for standing up when it would have been easier to sit down." "To Justice," Bella added, clinking her glass against Anthony's. "Slow, messy, but it's coming." Anthony allowed himself a real smile for the first time in days. He thought about his father, about the 40 acres that had grown into something 200 families now depended on, about how proud the old man would have been watching his son refuse to be invisible in a room full of people who should have known better. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Anthony admitted, half joking, swirling his tea. "Feels too easy after how hard the last 2 weeks have been." "Let yourself have this," Bella said. "You earned it." Halfway through dessert, Bella's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, frowning slightly. "Huh, that's strange." "What is it?" Naomi asked. "Nothing, probably." Bella set the phone face down, not wanting to ruin the moment. "Just a colleague mentioned Granger's PR firm has been unusually active online the past 2 days. Lots of posting, lots of engagement on some of their other accounts. Probably just damage control from the apology statement." "Probably," Anthony agreed, not thinking much of it. After everything that had happened, a little extra PR activity from Granger's seemed like the least surprising thing in the world. Of course, they'd be scrambling to manage their image after a story like Jennifer's. The conversation drifted back to lighter things. Naomi teasing her father about his sudden minor celebrity status, Bella recounting an old story from when she and Anthony first met, back when the cooperative was barely a dream scratched out on the back of a feed store receipt. For a few hours, none of them thought about boardrooms or contracts, or men named Beckman and Werlin. Anthony's phone buzzed against the table around 9:30, a news alert flashing across the screen. He glanced at it. Something about Granger Foods, the headline cut off before he could read it fully, and felt the faintest flicker of unease pass through him. But Naomi was laughing at something Bella said. The gumbo was good, and the kitchen felt warm in a way it hadn't in days. Anthony set the phone face down on the table, choosing the moment over the worry crawling at the edge of his mind. "Whatever it is," he said, picking his fork back up, "it can wait until morning." He had no idea how wrong he was. Anthony woke to 43 missed calls. He sat up fast, heart already pounding before his eyes had fully adjusted to the morning light. 43 calls. A dozen texts from Naomi, time-stamped starting at 6:15 a.m., each one more frantic than the last. "Dad, call me. Dad, wake up. Dad, call me now." He found her downstairs at the kitchen table, laptop open, face pale and tight. She turned the screen toward him without a word. A video. Already at 2 million views. The thumbnail showed Anthony mid-motion, half risen from his chair in the Granger boardroom, his face caught in an expression that looked out of context, almost violent. "Play it," Anthony said quietly. Naomi hit play. 14 seconds of footage. Anthony standing abruptly, chair scraping back hard, his voice clipped sharp. "I don't do business with men who can't see me." Then walking out, the door swinging shut behind him. That was it. 14 seconds. No Beckman ignoring him for 90 minutes. No mispronounced name. No coffee cup left empty. Just a black man standing up fast and storming out of a room full of calm, confused-looking executives. His voice the only raised one in the clip. "Where did this come from?" Anthony asked, his voice hollow. "It's everywhere," Naomi said. "Posted last night under some anonymous account, but it's spreading like wildfire now. People are saying you're unhinged. Some outlet already ran a piece calling you erratic and unprofessional." Her hands were shaking. "Dad, they edited it. They cut out everything that mattered and kept the part that makes you look like the problem." Anthony sat down slow, the chair groaning under him, staring at his own face frozen on the screen mid-shout. Hours ago he'd gone to bed feeling, for the first time in weeks, like things might actually be turning out right. Now he felt like the ground had opened up beneath him. His phone rang. Rosie, his cooperative manager, voice tight with worry. "Anthony, I just got off the phone with 2 of the new retailers that reached out after the interview. Both backed out. Said something about reputational caution until things settle. By mid-morning, a 3rd had pulled out too." Bella arrived at the farmhouse before noon, slamming her car door hard enough that Anthony heard it from the porch. She came in already talking, phone in hand. "It's worse than the retailers," she said. "I just got a call from the bank. They're freezing the cooperative's emergency line of credit. Effective immediately. Citing risk reassessment." "They can't do that," Naomi said. "We've never missed a payment, not once in 6 years. They can if they decide the cooperative's suddenly a liability." Bella's jaw was tight, working something over. "I started digging the second I heard. The bank's chairman sits on an investment board with ties to Granger. I can't prove it's connected yet. But Anthony, the timing isn't a coincidence. Nothing about this week has been a coincidence." Anthony stood at the window, looking out over the fields, harvest season bearing down fast, expenses piling up that the frozen credit line was supposed to cover. Equipment repairs, worker payroll, seed and fuel costs that didn't wait for boardroom politics to sort themselves out. 200 families. He kept coming back to that number, turning it over and over in his mind like a stone in his pocket. "I built something real," he said quietly, almost to himself, "and they're trying to take it, because I had the nerve to ask to be seen." Naomi found him an hour later, sitting alone at the kitchen table, a stack of unpaid supplier invoices spread out in front of him like a verdict already handed down. He hadn't touched them. Just sat staring, his shoulders sunk lower than she'd seen them in years. "Dad?" He didn't look up right away. "I keep thinking about your grandfather. How hard he worked to keep this land through years that tried everything to take it from him. And I'm sitting here wondering if I'm about to lose it because I refuse to stay quiet." "You didn't do anything wrong," Naomi said fiercely, sitting down beside him. "I know that." Anthony finally looked up at her, exhaustion carved deep into his face. "Doesn't make it hurt less." That night, well past 10, headlights swept across the front windows. Bella's car pulled into the drive, and she came up the porch steps with a manila envelope in her hand, her expression grim. "Granger's lawyers sent this over an hour ago," she said, setting it on the table. "A new settlement offer. Werlin wants an answer by tomorrow." Anthony stared at the envelope like it might bite him. "Read it tonight," Bella said quietly. "Just read it. We'll talk in the morning." Anthony sat alone at the kitchen table long after Bella and Naomi had gone quiet. The manila envelope open in front of him, pages spread out under the dim overhead light. Past midnight now. The house creaked around him, settling the way old farmhouses did, like it was breathing along with whatever decision he was wrestling toward. The settlement offer was simple, almost insultingly so. A lump payment, enough to cover the cooperative's frozen credit line twice over, enough to carry 200 families clean through harvest season and into next spring. In exchange, silence. No further statements to press. No cooperation with any ongoing investigations. The edited video would stand as the official record. Anthony Helmer, the man who stormed out, unprofessional and erratic. That story would live forever, uncorrected, while the truth stayed buried under a number with a lot of zeros. Naomi found him there at midnight, still in her robe, unable to sleep either. "You're actually considering it," she said. It wasn't a question. Anthony rubbed his eyes, exhaustion sitting heavy and physical in every part of him. "Naomi, I've got 200 families counting on payroll in 3 weeks. I've got equipment that needs repairs we can't afford without that credit line. I'm 50 years old, and I built this cooperative so other people wouldn't have to lose what your grandfather almost lost. I can't let my pride bury all of that. This isn't about pride." Naomi sat down across from him, voice low but fierce. "Dad, if you sign this, that video becomes the truth forever. The Ohio dairy supplier, the California distributor, everyone who came forward because you were brave enough to walk out first, they get left holding nothing. You'd be doing exactly what Werlin wanted from the very beginning. Disappearing quiet." "I know that." Anthony's voice cracked, just slightly. "You think I don't know that?" Bella, who'd stayed over rather than drive home that late, came down the stairs at the sound of raised voices, wrapping a cardigan tight around herself. "Nobody's signing anything tonight," she said firmly, sitting down between them. "Anthony, I understand the fear. I do. But this offer isn't going anywhere by morning. Sleep on it. Let's look at this with clear heads. The bank doesn't care about clear heads, Bella. It cares about Thursday's payroll. And I care about you not making a permanent decision out of panic," Bella shot back, just as firm. "You've held the line for 2 weeks. Don't break now, in the dark, exhausted, with nobody around to talk you through it properly." Anthony sat with that, hands pressed flat against the table, staring at the unsigned settlement like it was a living thing, daring him to make a mistake. "One more day," he said finally, quiet. "Give me one more day before I decide anything." The kitchen went still. Naomi reached over and squeezed his hand, and for a moment, the three of them just sat there in the half-dark, the weight of everything pressing down without anyone needing to say it out loud. Then a knock sounded at the front door. All three of them froze. It was nearly 1 in the morning. Nobody knocked on a farmhouse door at 1 in the morning unless something was wrong. Anthony rose slowly, exchanging a glance with Bella, who reached instinctively for her phone. He crossed the dark living room and pulled the door open, bracing himself for he didn't know what. Tobias Lindorf stood on the porch, hair disheveled, jacket wrinkled like he'd been wearing it for 2 days straight. His face was pale, eyes wide with something that looked like fear and determination wrapped together. "Anthony," Tobias said, voice shaking slightly, "I'm sorry to come this late. I didn't know who else to call." He held up his phone, hand trembling. "There's something I need to show you. Something I should have shown you days ago." Anthony stood in the doorway, the cold night air pressing in around him, looking at the young man who'd sat silent in that boardroom while his boss erased Anthony from the room entirely. "Come in," Anthony said slowly. Behind him, he heard Bella rise from the table, heard Naomi's sharp intake of breath. Whatever was on that phone, Anthony had a feeling it was about to change everything. Tobias stood in the middle of the living room, still in his wrinkled jacket, hands shaking as he pulled up something on his phone. Anthony, Naomi, and Bella gathered around him, the late hour forgotten, every bit of exhaustion burned away by the look on the young man's face. "I should have told you this 2 weeks ago," Tobias said, his voice unsteady. "I've been a coward about it, and I'm sorry. I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that it would just complicate things. But then I saw that video this morning, and I couldn't stay quiet anymore." "What is it, Tobias?" Anthony asked, careful, steady, even though his heart was pounding. "Granger has a policy," Internal practice, not official, but everyone in client-facing roles does it. We record major contract meetings on our personal phones, just for accuracy, in case there's a dispute later about what was actually said. Tobias swallowed hard. I recorded the entire meeting, the real one, all 90 minutes. The room went absolutely silent. "Play it," Bella said, her voice tight with controlled urgency. Tobias pulled up the file with trembling fingers and set the phone on the coffee table. Volume turned up high. The footage began, time-stamped, unedited, the full length of the meeting laid bare. Beckman's voice, warm and easy, directed entirely at Tobias from the opening handshake. The coffee served to everyone but Anthony. The mispronounced name, not once, but twice. Anthony's attempt to clarify the delivery clause cut off mid-sentence. Beckman's careless laugh as Anthony walked out. Cold feet. He'll be back by Friday. They always come back. Captured in full, unmistakable context. Naomi had her hand pressed over her mouth. Bella sat frozen, eyes locked on the screen, her lawyer's mind already racing through everything this footage proved. "This destroys the edited clip," Bella breathed. "Completely destroys it. Anyone watching this side by side can see exactly what they cut and exactly why they cut it." Anthony stared at the small screen, watching himself stand, watching the moment play out in full this time, with all 90 minutes of context behind it instead of 14 cherry-picked seconds. He felt something complicated rise in his chest. Vindication, yes, but also a deep, old exhaustion at having needed proof at all, at having his word not been enough on its own. "Why now?" Anthony asked quietly, looking at Tobias. "Why didn't you come forward when the story first broke?" Tobias's eyes were wet. "I was scared. I've got student loans, a mortgage, a job I can't easily replace. I told myself staying quiet wasn't the same as lying." He shook his head. "But watching that edited clip this morning, watching people call you erratic and unhinged when I know exactly what really happened in that room, I couldn't live with myself anymore. I'd rather lose my job than let that lie stand." Anthony stepped forward and put a firm hand on the younger man's shoulder. "That took courage, son. More than a lot of grown men have shown me in my life." Naomi was already moving, phone in hand. "I'm calling Jennifer. Right now. It's almost 1:30. I don't care." Jennifer picked up on the fourth ring, groggy but instantly alert the moment Naomi explained what they had. "Send me everything. Don't post it anywhere else first. Don't let anyone copy it loosely. I need the original file, untouched, so I can verify the metadata myself. I can meet first thing in the morning." "We'll be there," Naomi said. Bella turned to Tobias, her voice gentling slightly. "Are you prepared to go on record with this? Your name attached, on camera if necessary?" Tobias took a long breath, glancing at Anthony, then nodded firm. "Yes, I should have done it weeks ago. I'm not running from it now." "This likely ends your career at Granger," Bella warned him plainly. "You understand that?" "I understand." Tobias's voice steadied, something settling into place behind his eyes. "I'd rather be unemployed and honest than keep my job by letting a lie stand." Anthony shook his hand firm, looking him dead in the eye the way he'd wished. Weeks ago, someone across that boardroom table had looked at him. "Thank you," Anthony said simply. "I won't forget this." Outside, the first gray hint of dawn was beginning to creep over the tree line. None of them had slept. None of them planned to, not until this was finished. Jennifer was already at Bella's office by 7 the next morning, 2 coffees in hand, looking like she hadn't slept much either. She set her laptop on the conference table and waited as Tobias plugged in his phone, the original file transferring slow across the cable. "Walk me through the chain of custody," Jennifer said, all business now, No trace of the warmth from their coffee shop meeting days earlier. When did you record this? On what device? Has it been edited or compressed in any way since? Tobias answered every question carefully, precisely, while Jennifer cross-referenced the file's metadata against the timestamp on Anthony's calendar invite for the original meeting. The numbers matched down to the minute. The audio waveform was continuous, unbroken. No signs of cuts or splices anywhere in the full 90-minute file. "It's clean," Jennifer said finally, sitting back. "This is the real thing." She looked up at Anthony, something fierce and satisfied in her expression. "I need to reach out to Granger for comment before I publish anything. Standard practice. I won't let them say I didn't give them the chance to respond." "They'll stall," Bella warned. "Or deny it outright." "Maybe," Jennifer said. "But I have to try. It protects the story when it counts." Jennifer's email to Granger's communications office went out at 9 sharp, laying out exactly what she had. The unedited footage, Tobias willing to go on record, the clear evidence that the viral clip had been deliberately cut and leaked. She gave them until 5 o'clock that evening to respond. What none of them knew yet was the storm that email set off inside Granger's headquarters. Andrew Werlin received a forwarded copy of Jennifer's email at 9:47 a.m., and according to what would later come out, he sat with it for nearly 20 minutes before calling an emergency session with the company's legal counsel. He'd built a 30-year career on careful decisions, on protecting the institution above any one person inside it. But this, a deliberately edited clip, leaked to smear a man who'd been wronged in the first place. This wasn't the kind of mess that quiet money could fix anymore. He pulled Beckman's internal communications himself that afternoon, working through the company's email archive with growing dread. What he found confirmed his worst fear. An email thread, 3 days old, between Beckman and the head of Granger's outside PR firm. The instructions were explicit. Pull the clip where he stands up. Cut everything before it. Get it out anonymously by tonight. We need the narrative to flip before the shareholder report. Werlin sat alone in his office for a long time after reading it, the late afternoon light slanting through his windows. He thought about 30 years building Granger Foods into something he'd been proud of. He thought about the 3 suppliers Anthony's lawyer had quietly confirmed, the pattern stretching back further than anyone at the board level had wanted to admit. He thought about a video, 14 seconds long, designed to make a wronged man look unstable, ordered by the very CEO who'd wronged him in the first place. He made his decision before the sun went down. At 6:15 that evening, Jennifer received 2 things in her inbox almost simultaneously. The first was a brief, formal statement from Granger's communications office declining to comment further on personnel matters. The second, sent from a different address entirely, was a forwarded email chain, Beckman's own words, in writing, ordering the edited clip's creation and release. Andrew Werlin had leaked it himself. Attached was a short note. "I have called an emergency shareholder meeting for tomorrow morning. I believe the full truth needs to come out before then. Please publish whatever you believe serves that truth." Jennifer read it twice, then called Naomi immediately, her voice tight with barely contained urgency. "I have everything I need. The full unedited footage, Tobias on record, and now internal emails proving Beckman personally ordered the smear campaign. I'm publishing tonight." Anthony, gathered with Bella and Naomi around the kitchen table once again, listened to Naomi relay the news, feeling something shift deep in his chest. Not quite relief yet, but close to it. The ground beneath him, shaky for 2 long weeks, finally felt like it was holding. "Publish it," Anthony said quietly. "Let the whole thing be seen. All of it, finally, the way it should have been from the start." By 8 p.m., Jennifer's follow-up story went live. The emergency shareholder meeting began at 9 o'clock the next morning, streamed live to a packed virtual room of investors, journalists, and a press gallery so full that extra chairs had to be brought in. Anthony sat in the front row beside Bella, Naomi, and Tobias, the four of them given seats by Worland's office personally, an invitation that had arrived at 6 that morning with a single line: "You deserve to see this happen." Jennifer's follow-up story had detonated overnight. The full unedited footage, Tobias's on-record account, Beckman's own emails, in his own words, ordering the edited clip's creation. By sunrise, the narrative that had painted Anthony as erratic and unprofessional had collapsed entirely, replaced by outrage of a different kind. At Granger Foods, at Beckman specifically, at a company that had not only wronged a man, but tried to bury the truth when he refused to disappear quietly. Andrew Worland stood at the podium, his face drawn but steady, the weight of 30 years showing in every line of it. The room fell silent as he began to speak. "31 years ago, I helped build this company," Worland said, voice carrying clear through the room. "I have never been more ashamed of it than I am standing here today." He laid it out plainly: the boardroom meeting, the pattern of marginalized suppliers Bella had uncovered, the bribe attempt, the retaliation against Helmer Cooperative Farms, and, finally, the deliberately edited footage ordered by the company's own CEO. "Effective immediately," Worland said, turning slightly toward where Beckman sat rigid in the second row. "Rocco Beckman is removed as Chief Executive Officer of Granger Foods for conduct unbecoming of this office and a deliberate campaign of retaliation against a business partner who did nothing but ask to be treated with basic respect." Beckman shot to his feet, face flushing red. "This is outrageous. Andrew, you can't just—" "I can, and I have," Worland said, not raising his voice, not needing to. "The board voted unanimously this morning. Security will escort you out." 2 security officers stepped forward. Beckman's protests grew louder, sputtering something about lawyers, about his contract, about 30 years of growth he'd delivered the company. But his voice cracked under the weight of every camera in the room, capturing his unraveling in real time. Anthony watched him go, feeling something complicated settle in his chest. Not joy exactly. Something closer to a long exhale he hadn't realized he'd been holding for 2 weeks straight. Beckman was gone from the room within 90 seconds, his protests fading down the hallway outside. Worland turned back to the podium, visibly steadying himself. "To Anthony Helmer, and to every supplier this company has failed in the past 2 years, I cannot undo what's been done. But I can promise you, this board is committed to making it right." The room erupted into murmurs, phones raised, journalists already typing furiously. Anthony sat still in his chair, Naomi's hand gripping his tight, Bella's eyes wet beside him. Then, from somewhere near the back of the room, a new voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Helmer." Anthony turned. A tall man in a charcoal suit was making his way down the aisle, cameras swinging to follow him. Walter Dells, mid-50s, CEO of one of Granger's biggest rivals, a man Anthony had only ever seen in business headlines. He stopped in front of Anthony, extending his hand. "I've been watching this story unfold for 2 weeks," Dells said, loud enough for the cameras to catch every word. "What happened to you was wrong. What you did about it took more courage than most men in this industry have ever shown." He paused, letting the moment breathe. "My company would be honored to offer Helmer Cooperative Farms a $650 million multi-year supply contract. Right here, right now." The room went electric. Phones swung toward Anthony, cameras flashing, journalists shouting questions all at once. Anthony stood slowly, looking at Dells's outstretched hand, then at Naomi beside him, eyes wide and shining, then at Tobias, who'd risked everything to make this moment possible. He thought about his father, about 40 acres and 200 families, and a boardroom where he'd once been treated like furniture. "I'll need a pen," Anthony said, his voice steady, carrying clear through the room. Dells smiled and snapped his fingers. An assistant appeared instantly with a contract and a pen. Anthony took it, standing tall in full view of every camera, every journalist, every shareholder who had watched Beckman dragged out moments before. This time, the whole world was watching him sign. The pen moved across the page, and the room erupted into applause. Anthony signed his name in full view of every camera, every shareholder, every journalist who'd watched Rocco Beckman dragged out of the building minutes before. Walter Dells shook his hand firm, the flash of cameras catching the moment from every angle. The photo that would run on front pages by morning. The image that would come to define the entire story. Anthony Helmer, 50 years old, standing tall, finally seen. Naomi hugged him so hard he nearly lost his footing. Tobias stood off to the side, tears in his eyes, and Anthony pulled him into the moment too, hand firm on his shoulder. "You did this," Anthony told him. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Bella watched it all with her arms crossed and a rare, full smile breaking across her face. "Justice," she said quietly, mostly to herself. "Slow and messy, just like I told you." By the time they left the building, the news was already everywhere. Granger Foods' stock, which had cratered overnight, began climbing back the moment word spread of Beckman's removal and Werlin's public accountability. Helmer Cooperative Farms trended nationally for the second time in 2 weeks, this time for an entirely different reason. The credit freeze lifted within hours. Bella made one phone call to the bank, mentioned the day's headlines, and the regional manager who'd cited risk reassessment 2 days earlier suddenly found the cooperative's account perfectly sound after all. Anthony didn't bother asking questions. He just signed the paperwork and let Rosie get back to running payroll without fear hanging over every line item. The weeks that followed moved fast. Dells Foods' legal team worked with Bella to finalize the full contract terms, structuring the $650 million partnership to begin shipments the following month. New hires came through the cooperative's gates almost daily, word having spread through 3 counties about what Helmer Cooperative Farms had survived and what it had won. Anthony walked each new worker through the fields himself, the same way his father had once walked him, pointing out which rows needed extra care, which equipment had a temperamental engine, which mornings the frost came in hardest. 3 weeks after the shareholder meeting, Anthony stood in his office at the cooperative's main building, hanging 2 framed items side by side on the wall behind his desk. The first was the signed Dells contract, $650 million committed to 200 families who'd trusted him through the worst of it. The second was smaller, simpler. A single photograph Naomi had pulled from a news article, capturing the exact moment Anthony stood up in that Granger boardroom weeks earlier. Unsigned contract laid flat on the table behind him. "Why keep that one?" Naomi had asked, surprised, when he first hung it. "Because I never want to forget what it cost to get here," Anthony told her. "And I never want to forget that standing up was worth it, even before I knew how it would end." Tobias visited that afternoon, dressed casual now instead of the corporate suits Anthony remembered from the boardroom, having left Granger entirely and started consulting independently for smaller agricultural businesses navigating exactly the kind of mistreatment he'd witnessed firsthand. Anthony welcomed him warmly, walked him through the fields, introduced him to Rosie and the new hires like he was family. "You ever regret it?" Anthony asked him, the 2 of them standing at the edge of the south field as the afternoon sun dipped lower. "Walking away from a career like that?" Tobias thought about it for a long moment. "Not for a second. I make less money now." but I sleep better than I did in 5 years at Granger." Anthony understood that completely. That evening, after Tobias had gone and the farmhouse had gone quiet, Anthony walked out to the edge of his fields alone, the way he had most evenings since he was a boy following his father through these same rows. The sun was sinking low, painting the sky orange and gold, the first of Dell's Foods delivery trucks rolling out down the long dirt drive, the new partnership banner stenciled clean across their sides. He thought about that boardroom, about a man who couldn't be bothered to say his name right, about 90 minutes of being looked through like glass. He thought about how close he'd come to signing his silence away, just to save what mattered most. Justice hadn't come from anger, in the end. It had come from refusing to disappear quietly. Anthony watched the trucks roll out under the darkening sky, 200 families' future riding inside them. His name, finally, fully seen. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.